Welcome everyone to another episode of the Art of Slowing Down podcast. It's your host here, Annalena, and I'm super happy because I have a guest here today that has been on the podcast already. And I told her already, like, hey, this was the most listened episode to ever so far on this podcast. I had over 1,200 downloads, I think. So welcome, Tarah. So happy to have you.
Hi, so nice to be back. I was just telling this to Annalena too this morning that she was one of the first like human design people who already had an established business to invite me into some like things. We did this, or her and Miranda were doing this human design summit that I had just started my business and they had invited me into that, and it was such a success. And we did a podcast together, and I got so many clients and readings from that from you. A lot of really beautiful people that I still look back on and I'm like, you know, those were dream clients. You know, when you have readings with people or sessions and you're like connect so much with them and
Yeah.
it just forever feels like this magic. I've had people like that come from you. So, yeah, it was really cool. And now here we are. Everything is expanded. And as
Yeah.
we said, everything has changed for both of us a lot. So it's kind of cool to be back here. It's like a
Yeah.
cycle.
Yeah, exactly. And I was gonna read your bio, but I think it's not necessary. So, because you already shared, right? We met like over 2.5 years ago online, and I think what attracted me to you was your authenticity, and also if I look back, you stood out at the summit for sure because you had such a genuine, loving, open energy. And I think that also made it so successful for you. Because oftentimes people, especially with summits, there is kind of this underlying intention of like, let me join to get clients, or let me see how many email subscribers the person has. Like, we literally, when we selected the participants and decided who to reach out, it was more like intuitively, who do we feel drawn to energetically. And because I'm always turned off when people invite me to a summit and then there's this disclaimer like, you have to have an email list of X thousands of people or
Mm.
have a following of this. Like, it kind of misses the point, of like, is this about the numbers and likes, or is this about the person you want to really connect to? So that's really, I think, your success secret is being authentic.
Thank you. That's actually a really good reflection to hear because as I was thinking about that, I'm like, I still don't have an email list. I've been wanting to set one up just in case like Instagram disappears or something.
Yeah,
I'm like,
you
maybe
better
it'd be
do.
cool to have an email list. Still don't have one. Definitely wasn't thinking about that. Definitely wasn't even thinking I would get clients from that, but ended up, you know? So, yeah, something I actually always value so much, not just in myself. I try to be authentic myself, but in other people is authenticity in life, you
Mhm.
know? Truly, like I feel like everyone can relate to that, just feeling like there's nothing better or richer than having a conversation or a moment with somebody who's just fully authentic. As sometimes intimidating that can be, it's just amazing. So, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So you are also, I think that's how we also connected, because in tropical, I'm also a manifesting generator. You're a 3-5 manifesting generator. And I think we both can really connect to the multi-passionate energy. And I mean, you travel a lot. You are a very active
Mhm.
person. You are hiking in the mountains a lot. And I think I love that about you, because you share that this natural side of you and who you really are without
Mm.
really holding back. So I think that's truly fantastic. So many listeners may not have been on my podcast over 2 years ago, right? So some of you may, so this is a special treat for all of you anyways, but tell us a little bit about how human design changed your life, or why did you get so passionate about it and started to share with other people?
I think truly it's such a funny answer because I don't really even know exactly what it was because you're right, I'm so multi-passionate and generally the jobs I've always liked to do in life are very physical jobs. Like I've worked with horses, training horses, taking out horseback rides in the mountains. I worked many years on the trail crew for the national park, building trails, hauling around a chainsaw, like getting truly just 10 hours of like hot, physical, sweaty work where you're just like in the mud and like mosquitoes everywhere. And I love physical work like that. And I've done a lot of things. I worked in a investment banking firm. I worked in radio. I studied radio and TV in school. So I've always really loved physical work, which is why it's interesting to me now that I fully just do human design stuff. And I do it mostly online. I live in Mexico. I travel a lot. So it works really well that way. And there are other things I think I tie into it. But why human design? That's a question sometimes now I ask myself. I'm like, how did I get here? What am I doing? And it was just when I learned about human design, I was actually traveling in Asia for about a year and I learned about it there. And it was just one of those things that interested me a lot because when I started like looking at my chart and learning about it and other people's charts and stuff, it just really, really clicked and made sense to me more than, for example, other sort of systems have like personality typing systems like the Myers-Briggs, which maybe I just haven't investigated it enough. I still think it's cool, but for some reason, human design just really, really stuck. It just didn't leave me. It was like it just stuck to me and kept going.
Yeah.
And so here I am. The more I learned about it, the more fascinated I became. And like I was just saying to you this morning, I have so many questions still about how does the system exist? Like there are so many details, so many questions I have about why it's valid and how it's calculated and just all the different possibilities of how it can be, like we were saying, the true sidereal and everything. But it all comes back to me in real life. I'm reminded every day of seeing these things play out in life. Like, for example, all the projectors in my life, there are certain similar themes that I just see in them always, and the manifestors and the generators. Like there are just these big basic parts of human design that are just too real to not be true. And I think that's really cool. And those bigger things like the strategy and authority, and I said this, I think, in our last podcast, everything about the emotional waves and the whole emotional authority, the whole emotional system in human design is so, so real to me for everybody. And I think these things are so helpful to know about because as a highly emotional person myself, learning to come to terms with and actually understand my emotional nature has completely changed the way I accept myself and am okay with myself. And it doesn't limit me anymore in a way where I used to really think there was something wrong with me. And now it's more fascinating and loving and okay to just be who I am and understand it in a different way. So those are my thoughts. Like those are just some of the big things that I think are why human design.
Yeah, I love it. Let's talk about the emotions because this is also something for me. And as you know, in my tropical, I have a completely open solar plexus, right? But I can also say, like, I have been very judgy, with why do I feel this way and I shouldn't feel this way. And I have made a lot of decisions in the past where, especially in my business and spending too much money on things because I had fear of missing out or I projected that somebody can make it happen for me, or I went into kind of a pressured situation. And so human design was this big aha moment of like, and I learned this actually through the emotional wave, right? From the defined, like you have it, that, oh, I'm not supposed to make a reactive decision. It's actually okay to feel meh. It's okay to feel blah and sad. And then even with the gene keys helped me even more so realize that, oh, this is the breeding ground, the fertile soil for the magic and the creativity to actually come out of it, right? When we can allow ourselves to be with these emotional states. So I would love to hear, from your experience with emotional authority, how this has been. And also, if you can add on to that, I have many times people ask me, let's say there's a generator or a manifesting generator, they have emotional authority, and they keep telling me like, oh, all this sacral response stuff doesn't apply to me, because it still does. And if you can elaborate a little bit on that in your magic Tarah way, I would love for you to explain that. Like, how do we make decisions as a sacral being with emotional authority?
Yeah, it's such a good question, right? Because yes, if you have emotional authority, which half the people in the world do, according to tropical human design, there's still a difference if you have a defined sacral, and even there's still a difference if there's a defined spleen as well, which I also have, So if you think about sacral authority and spleen authority, those are still things that are valid and helpful to you. For example, we'll take me for an example. I'm an emotional manifesting generator, also with a defined spleen. I have very quick intuitive instincts and insights that come from the spleen always. And also the sacral is so strong. As a Mani Gen, if it's like, wow, something just arrived and I'm just going to go for it, I start moving. I also, knowing the nature of the emotional wave, it's just this extra awareness that I have of like when I get back into the moment and to myself, and maybe I took a few breaths or a few steps and I'm like, wait, what's happening? I can, have more of an awareness of if my emotions are really, really heightened, I'm extra fast. I'm already so fast as a Mani Gen and as a person. Like, but when I have those heightened emotions, everything is just, yes, like unstoppable. Nobody can stop me. I can do anything. I can talk to anyone. I can just be the most magnetic, wild person ever. But the thing that's really, really like been most important to me learning about the emotions is actually probably for most people the lower ends of the emotional waves. And by the way, so many people experience these lower emotional frequencies, just like melancholy, for example, from other parts in their design. Anything that's individual circuitry, any gates or channels carry that sense of melancholy. So a lot of people can relate to these feelings of going through periods where I always say it feels like there's suddenly a blindfold on. Life was going so well. I talk about this in readings and with clients I have all the time who have like the channel mutation or other individual channels where everything's going well. It's so clear. You're on the right track. Like everything's making sense. Everything's rolling. And then suddenly out of nowhere, this is when I get messages from all my one-on-one clients or voice notes. They're like, I don't know what happened. Like, nothing is feeling right anymore. And I feel so lost. And I'm just not feeling good about myself or about my business or about anything. And to me, this is a time to really pay attention to and say, whoa, whatever is happening, this obviously isn't a time of clarity. This obviously isn't a time of maybe making some big important decisions. The whole nature of what the emotional wave teaches us is that nothing lasts, everything passes, and that we go through sometimes very sudden periods where it drops and the blindfold gets put on. And it's important to just remember that, because if you don't remember that, I think sometimes in those moments you can tend to freak out, or at least I do, where like, I think even last week I was feeling this, like, I was flowing so much in my business and my life plans and everything felt good. And now suddenly I'm just like getting frustrated and scared and kind of down because I just feel lost and I feel just meh and melancholy. And I think the whole nature of this is just like not attaching too much to that. And another thing I practice in my life is Vipassana meditation. And through that, if anyone knows about Vipassana, that's the whole teaching in itself is, letting go of this attachment we have to anything, to feelings, to the good feelings, to the bad feelings, just attachment in general, knowing that everything is changing always, all the time. Nothing is permanent. And that's kind of what the emotional wave is. And although there's so much more behind it, like why it's even here, why it exists, how it shows up for different people, depending on what emotional waves they have, everyone has different patterns and themes. I think there's just a lot we can learn from it, including something I haven't said yet is this, especially I think when we have a manifester or a manifesting generator who already brings such a big presence when they walk into a room, if you're also emotional and potentially experiencing an emotional wave, maybe not, you bring this big emotional presence into the room as well. And sometimes from my own experience carrying that, I always use the example when I was a kid growing up, I was the only emotional authority person in my whole family. Everyone else has an undefined solar plexus. And I always remember like going through these periods of deep sadness and melancholy and emotional whatever turmoil. And sometimes I didn't even want to come upstairs to the kitchen where everyone was in the morning because I kind of just knew deep down everyone instantly gets like walking on eggshells when I'm there. And sometimes I'll get comments like, oh, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? Or like, oh, you're grumpy today. Or like everyone's just kind of like, eh. And I deep down feel like a bit ashamed. I'm like, what's wrong with me? Why do I have to bring this back? And then it turns into frustration, and it's just, I think from my experience being an emotional authority person with two emotional waves and a lot of emotional energy, I feel like sometimes I do have this shame for showing up the way I do at times because I feel like there's nothing I can do about it. I feel like there's no way to lessen it. The thing I've learned that helps with this is kind of the manifestor strategy, informing, communicating with people. Hey, yeah, I'm just feeling like this today, whatever that is. It's not your fault. It has nothing to do with you, but I'm just feeling this. And yeah, it's okay. Like it'll pass. But at least when you communicate with people and they know, then it just relieves a lot of tension.
Mm. Yeah, and
So yeah, I have a lot of thoughts.
yeah, and it really helps that other people don't start to make up stories. Oh, she doesn't like me. She has something against me and stuff like that, right? So there's a couple of things that I got inspired to talk about in response. So the first is that people get so caught up, I think, with this defined and undefined, or I have it, I don't have it, right? Because that's not what it means. And I have really learned this mostly through the gene keys, because in the gene keys, we don't have types, we don't have any authority. We just have the 64 gene keys. And also all of the gene keys, like you said, especially like the first gene key, which is from the individual circuitry, right? Is like deep damn melancholy, like feeling really, really off. It's not an emotional gate, right? So the way that I see the defined and undefined is that through you having the emotional authority, right? You model this into the world so that we all get to learn. Like it's almost like your job to really, as an example, as a role model, to teach this to us. Because for me, with the undefined emotional authority, I still have emotions. I feel a lot. And everything you're saying, I relate to that as well. I have also these like, oh my God, I feel amazing. And then all of a sudden, blah, and everything feels shitty. I don't believe in myself anymore. And who's going to listen to my podcast? All this kind of jazz, right? And I think it's a little bit more variable for me. And it's more like I learned this through people around me, right? Like you, other people. But at the end of the day, it applies to all of us, right? And that's what really made me realize at some point how actually beautiful and flexible human design is, right? Because it's this like, we're just mirroring each other all the time with all these different things. So that through the relationships, we can learn about this wisdom. And I don't know if you have also looked into Kabbalah. Kabbalah is also part of human design. And have you like looked deeper into it?
From what I know of Kabbalah, it's something I'm more recently starting to discover. I love it. Like to me, it's such a spiritual side of human design in a way. Like there are so many different parts, and there are a few different Kabbalah teachers that I follow, and I've considered lately doing more like education or something in Kabbalah. So I can't say in detail exactly much, I guess, but everything I learn about it, I find very fascinating, and I really relate to kind of just all the principles behind Kabbalah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. Because it's also like, for me, and I think you was the same. It was first human design, then was the gene keys. And also me more recently, Kabbalah has been really coming strongly into my world through David Guillaume. He was on Jenna Zoe's podcast. You probably follow him. And
Yeah.
I personally taking the vitamins from Mary Ruth Organics. That's the company he has with his wife. I've known them like for 5+ years, I think, or 4 years, something like that. I think they always had them at Whole Foods. And I was very like funny coincidence when I learned, oh, he's the husband and this is the vitamins I used to take. And so it was like, and I started to take Kabbalah 1 and 2. And what you just described, because I was curious, like, okay, how is this connected with human design? I heard from, I think, Karen Parker that it's somewhere in the channels and the Tree of Life, but there wasn't much more explanation about it. And so one of the things, and I'm still like a bloody beginner with that, is that I learned through David's teachings that, when we feel like blah and off, which let's relate now to the emotional low, how we feel it, or the melancholy, that is actually a good thing, because this is a sign that he calls it's the creator, the light wants to come through us. So it's almost like we have to feel the pressure, and we have to be aware that something that is not in alignment with we being our highest self, or we being of service, we're sharing our gift, right? Which I think can so easily happen when we have one of these, like everything is going well. I think we can get so easily into our ego and forget what it's really about, right? I'm making all the money, like, let me just focus on this, right? And everybody wants to work with me. It's for the ego, it's awesome, right? And I can say for myself, it's so damn easy in that state to lose the true connection of, let me be of service to humanity, let me really be giving to the world instead of constantly taking, right? And in a way, it's like for us an invitation to actually be excited because a next level wants to come through us, which is the exact same thing that the gene keys are all about, right? The gift is in the shadow. So the Kabbalistic wisdom is there, what I have learned in the emotional wave. It's there in all of the gene keys. And it's just presented in such a different language through Kabbalah, but in a way, it's all the same. And I just love how I see now, everybody is like talking about the same thing, but there are a million different ways of how we can communicate this. And, like you and I, we were like, it's human design. Another person like, no, it's Kabbalah. No, it's the Gene Keys. Maybe it's all of it. Like now it's all coming together, right? And that's also what I love with Kabbalah is that people from all kind of different religions are actually attending the Kabbalah seminars. There's lots of celebrities also. I think Madonna, Aston Kutcher and his wife, like many people that are very deeply in Kabbalah. And what is so resonate also with the common theme that I see there is this yin and yang balance between, yes, we want financial freedom, right? Because who doesn't? Let's be real. But only if it comes from really being of service, where we really have a product or service that is really a win-win for humanity. And, because that was just, for me, thank you. Because also to see that a company like Mary Ruth Organics is highly successful money-wise, but it came from this like non-negotiable of like, it can only be something that really helps people,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a cool thing to explore. That's something that Jenna Zoe, I feel like, is one of her big principles of everything she teaches, because I know she was a Kabbalah student before anything else.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I value actually learning from her, because as everybody knows, she's kind of gone into her own route way in human design. But the whole essence behind everything she teaches is about this, right? It's about this, like, at some point, everything you have to do has to come from a place of like authenticity and like these good intentions, and the lies aren't going to sustain themselves, and sneaking around and making money out of like taking from others, something that people, and she always talks about, is like this wronging yourself with other people, like I'm better because I do this, and so that means this, or I'm more spiritual, or I'm whatever. And how we're coming to a place in the world and in time where all of that stuff and all of that fluff can't sustain itself, right? It's kind of what you said. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah.
I love it. Yes.
Trying to find words.
Yeah, we're speechless. Exactly. So let's talk about this a little bit more, because I have been contemplating recently more on human design. Obviously it came into my life for a reason. And it was the one thing where I was such a body yes, and like, okay, this is going to be for me for a really, really long time, and I'm going to teach it and all of it. And it has been so profoundly life-changing that I'm so grateful for it, right? Now, as my journey has evolved, we briefly talked about it before we started recording, I have been pulled into this true sidereal version now, a cosmic human design, And first I wanted to resist it because my ego was like, well, but be careful because people are not going to like it, and your business and making money and all these kind of things. But I was like, okay, what is the one thing that human design has taught me? I have to be true to myself, and I have to follow that. So that's, I think, the courage we have to bring into life, right? And I also started to see that, because I got so many messages from people, it was almost insane, almost daily, people thanking me for like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Because apparently there have been people for years already working with Truth Ideal, but there were people that didn't like it. I told them they should better not talk about it. This kind of undercover what it turned into. And it was also a little bit shocking for me, because it made me realize that how do I not want to use human design, right? I don't want to use this to make people think they don't have a choice or they have to live out this gate, or where it's limiting in this way, right? And also what I realized from my own experience, so I'm a 2-4 manager in tropical, and I'm a 5-1 generator, very different centers actually defined. And it made me realize there was a part of me that was over-identifying with a couple of things in my tropical chart. So it was a nice awakening moment to realize, like, oh, it sometimes happens so subtly that we're not even aware of it. And I have to say, I work with a lot of people, or I had a lot of interactions also on Instagram with people, where I could sense this, like, people felt they're better than another type. So there was what was coming up, the shadow of hierarchy from the 50th gene key, people feeling better than others, and also people actually being in a reactive mode of like, oh, but you cannot do this because you're this type, or you should only do this, where there is this like just very unpleasant feeling all around, and not the love and not the light that I was looking for. And I think it was also a little bit in my shadow, like, because we get judgy, right? And now recently I have realized that that all had to happen, or is currently the process of happening, because human design and many other things I think are here, also Kabbalah, also the gene keys, to bring up our shadows. In the gene keys, I see my shadow through reading the shadow there. And yes, we also have these gates in human design, but in human design, we have these types. And if my ego falls into superiority or inferiority because of what my human design chart says, and this is also what I heard in the Kabbalah, that's exactly when we are not with the light. We are off the light, right? We are actually more with the ego, right? Where we feel separate from others, or we feel like it's this, like, I think he calls it instant gratification, where when you feel better than somebody, right? It's like, it feels good. It gives you like almost like drugs. It's like, yeah, oh my gosh, right? And quite the opposite when we feel like less than somebody else. And just this awareness was mind-blowing for me, because I have to be honest, like, I'm not completely free of it. It's like daily work, right? For me now to like, oh, hold on, Annalena, just because you have X amount of Instagram followers doesn't mean anything, because somebody has 100. You're not better than them or any of that, right? And I have to be honest, like, not even with this example, but there's some other things where this comes up in certain things, right? Where our feeling good depends on feeling better than other people. And that's all part of the ego, right?
True. Yeah, I can totally relate to that, and also just relate to like over identifying with certain things. Because before this conversation, when you were showing me my true sidereal chart, it's like this attachment to like, no, but my human design chart, I see it over there disappearing, like the emotional wave, it's mine, it's mine.
Yeah.
It's such a good thing to like, to always just, what's the word? Confront yourself with like, there's always kind of like the themes of the Open Ajna Center, right? Like, there's not just one way. There's not just one perspective. There's always more. There's always more questions. There's always more answers. There's always more to discover. That's what science teaches us, like we know what we know now, but we're always going to find out more. We're always going to learn more. And that's how I also feel with human design. I don't feel like this is it and that's that. And in a certain sense, I really have to believe in the things I teach, because my whole life and business runs on this right now. And one of the biggest values I have in the work I do is keeping that reminder of the Open Ajna here. Like, this is not everything. This is here to be experimented with. And also, one of my favorite non-negotiable things that I bring into all of what I do in human design is, how can we actually find a gift or a positive, like, way of using whatever it is you see in your chart, whether you're a projector or you have an open root center or you have this or you have that, doesn't matter. That's a gift of mine, even in life, is like, oh, okay, so you live here, but you don't want to live there. How can we use that to your advantage? How can we make your life better with whatever presents itself, and trying to focus on that instead of like getting trapped in anything, in any negatives. And so far, that has been something that I think has really kept me afloat and soaring in this business and what I love to do. If it wasn't for that, yeah, I don't know if I would be doing this or not. Do you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. I love that. Yeah, because that's actually the thing I was also reflecting on the other day. Any tool like human design in this example, the way you see it depends on your level of consciousness. I think you can look at any chart and like, oh, I'm screwed, or this is bad, or this is not good, or da, 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 if you had that kind of more victim mode kind of consciousness, right? Which are also our shadows.
Yeah.
It has its place also. And we can also see it like you just described from the perspective of like, what's my superpower here? What is the gift here? And really, you can look at any chart. I think you and I, we have done hundreds by now, right? Where we just like every chart is so beautiful because the thing is, everyone has all these gates defined, right? And yeah, centers are defined or undefined, okay. But if you have a center defined or undefined, you can, in both scenarios, you can be either in the shadow or you can be in the higher expression, right? And let's talk about the ajna, for example. So I think both you and I, we have an undefined ajna in the tropical, right? And I was always like, yeah, that's why I have such an open, flexible view of thinking. I can see all the different perspectives. Guess what in my true sidereal chart? It's freaking defined.
Yeah, I bet.
And but I also have learned already before from working with other people, it doesn't mean when somebody has a defined center that they cannot have an open perspective or view of things. It may be harder for me with a defined ajna, but I'm actually here to learn from the undefined to be more open-minded and to be more flexible, right? So it's also the really high expression of the defined ajna is that. And then, of course, I looked at my astrology and I think my South Node is in Sagittarius. And now I can justify with that. Of course, like Sagittarius energy is all about more freedom and being open-minded, right? That's actually something that grounds me. So I started to notice like in both charts, there are a lot of similarities. And in one, also, for example, I have a defined throat center, obviously, as a manager in my tropical, and my true sidereal is undefined. And I could tell myself, oh my God, this cannot be, or whatever. But the more I felt into it, I can totally create a story where both fits perfectly for me.
Interesting.
And both truly, honestly make sense. Because like my tropical chart is the 2145 channel to my throat. I love to talk about money and things like that. But I also have noticed many times I really need a break when I talk a lot, like on a podcast or one of these 2-hour master classes I do. And I think the internet was wonky. Could you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, let's continue. This is real life podcast recording. I noticed that I do need a lot of rest and I really need to be quiet with my voice. And sometimes there's nothing coming out. It's like blank. But for me, it was like, okay, because I have a defined will center, it needs consistent rest. That's why it is like that, right? That was kind of my logic. And now in my true sidereal, I have an undefined throat center, still gate 45, also gate 12, and I think 33, something like that. And now it clicked even deeper because I was like, yeah, I love to talk and reflect back to people. Like even what we're doing right now, I would be like, yeah, that's like the undefined throat center, right? You share something, I reflect it back. And I also, all my life was always like, I feel like I talk differently depending on who I'm with, because that's how we say with the undefined throat center, right? So, and I still love to talk about money. I love to teach, which both gate 45, gate 12 are like teaching kind of energies, right? So yeah, both charts, I can create a story that really validates who I am and what feels right to me. I'm at a point right now where I can say that the true sidereal just clicks a tick more, or it feels like more like with the tropical, I felt in hindsight that there were some things I was trying to talk myself into, if that makes sense, just for it to make sense. but not in a bad way, I have to say, right? But now this whole experience is just, you know what, any chart that comes my way, and we evolve, we grow as humans. Maybe for right now, this is a chart for me to activate something within me, particular gene keys, perhaps. And in a couple of years from now, there's a whole new version coming out. And
Right.
it just gives me some other particular energies in the chart to look at, which is beautiful also because I always learned, I picked that up from Karen Parker, this idea like we have all of the chart, all of the centers, all of the gates, all of the channels, all of that wisdom. I'm realizing now is all of that wisdom that Kabbalah teaches, for example, you know? And in human design, we can be so like, yeah, but I can only be this or that. There's this black or white thinking, which I think we're here to transcend, right?
Totally. Yeah, it's so true. If you even think about human design, it's like in someone's chart, they can be a manifesting generator with a ton of projected channels and projector energy, which requires the waiting for the invitation. And if you look at transits, like we transit through the year, we're going to touch on every gate. So we're going to experience that anyways. So you can't even say like, oh, I'm never going to know what gate 12 feels like, because you're going to go through periods where you have that activated anyways, according to human design. So it's just this, this conversation raises so many questions, but I think one of the important ones is, you know, something to always ask yourself when you're learning about this stuff or using it is this helpful to me? Is
Yeah.
this practically helpful? Is it making my life better? Or is it limiting me? Is it limiting the way that I think or act? You know, because if you can practically see proof in your life that, you know, waiting out my emotional wave actually allows me to make better decisions quicker, and I can actually move through these like periods in my life quicker where I just get down and blah, whatever. And you see that less time passes, you have more success in just being yourself and being happy, whatever it is, then I'm like, great. You know, if you can see it play out in life, then that's awesome. But yeah, obviously we still all go through, like you said, different points where we fall into whatever beliefs or, you know, times where we have lessons to learn in ourselves. I mean, I'm always going through that. So I could never tell you for sure that one thing is real and one thing is not. Like to me, it's all an adventure.
Yeah, no, I love that because I think, I mean, we're humans, we want the answer, right? Or the what is the right way. And I think that's just the illusion we live in. There is no one way, there is no like one truth. It's really what resonates. And like you say, if human design resonates with you, or those of you that are listening right now, that's absolutely fantastic. But we have to understand that it may not resonate with other people, you know? And then there's
Yeah.
also, I think, opponents of human design. They're like, oh, this is like boxing people in. But they may not see that it's actually bringing so much freedom, so much recognition, so much self-love to thousands and thousands of people. So it's exactly what you said, right? If it, for some it works, for others it doesn't. And that's why I always say, like, use what resonates and leave the rest, you know? Because otherwise it's an ego trip that I'm running. Like, oh, because I love human design now, like everybody needs to check it out, you know? I think in the very beginning, and I quickly realized it, and I stepped back, like my sisters and friends, I wanted to like, you have to check it out, or let me gift you a human design reading. But you know what? If that's not, let them come to me. And thankfully, I learned this through the projected energy so much in the human design. And I was like, that's awesome. It works for me, right? But if my sisters or my best friend never even cares about human design, then that, that's perfect as well, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, we have so much to learn. I think that's what I'm feeling during this conversation. I'm like, yeah, you know, we have so much to learn in life. So it's cool to always check on yourself and like check in and ask those questions like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah, I'm curious, like, what is the biggest thing that you have learned from your clients, you know, working with them on human design?
Oh, wow. What's the biggest thing I've learned from my clients? I mean, I learned so much about what I've like the information I've learned in human design through my clients. If anyone knows anything about the profiles, I'm a 3-5 profile. by definition, I'm someone who learns through experience, which is very true to me in my life, in my childhood now. Even recently, I've been seeing a lot of scorpions in my house and I've never been stung. And I did a ton of research on what happens when you get stung by a scorpion and what it feels like. But I have this inclination. I will admit, I secretly want to get stung because I
Funny.
just want to know what happens. I want to know what it feels like. And I don't really want to get stung. Now I'm probably going to get stung after saying that. But I just need to feel it. I need to. And so when
Mhm.
there are things I've learned in human design, for example, what it is to be a projector or what it is to have certain channels or certain profiles. These are things that I don't experience myself, but when I work with and talk to people who do, and they share their experiences and what happens to them and what they've learned, it helps teach me about these things through someone else's experience. And
Mhm.
so human design has taught me a lot about itself through other people. And yeah, it's oh man, there are so many things I've learned, but I'm trying to think of specific examples. I think I learn a lot about why people are the way they are just by being able to have a human design reading with someone because, they show up to me with their questions. And a lot of people, the biggest questions I think that people bring to human design readings are like, I'm lost in life. I don't know what to do. Like, I want to know how to navigate my relationships. I want to know how to trust myself and I want to know how to figure out what to do with my life. Those are like the big things that come up, right? And that's so
Yeah.
interesting because that's so common, like a common theme across the board, everyone, no matter where they come from, who they
Yeah.
are. So it's just interesting to me. I love working with people through this system because I learn so much as well. So yeah.
Mm. Yeah, I have had a very similar experience. And I find that, because I was a coach before, and I think I was a great coach, but human design just put kind of the cherry on the cake in a way because it gives you that uniqueness of that person, like the essence of the person, where you can customize it so much. And there's something there, which I know you have experiences as well, that I think we intuitively connect with a chart to the person in some way, because I mean, there must be a
Mhm.
reason why this came so easy to us, right? I think we had
Mhm.
that conversation. I was like, I felt like I just remembered it, and it's just it's like, oh, common sense. Like everybody understands the chart. And I had to check in with myself over and over again to realize that it's actually very hard to understand any of this in this chart for many people, right? So it's a gift I have, you have, that we can tune into this chart. And especially the more intuitively I do this now, the more powerful it is. And then, yeah, people walk away with this like new sense of clarity. Oh, these are my next step. And this like, oh, it's safe to trust myself. It's really magical. And I feel even one session, I have so many people, and I want to hear from you as well. Like they come back a year later and so much magic has happened. Sometimes you don't
Yeah.
even have to work for like a year or something like this. I mean, of course, sometimes that's the right thing to do, especially when it's about business building and stuff. But sometimes they just need that shift in direction, that little
Mm.
like reminder, and here you go. All of a sudden, it all unfolds.
That's so true. I think there's a certain potency in people actually voicing their desires or voicing their truth, even if it's a struggle. Like, I'll be honest, sometimes people will come up, they'll be like, I'll be honest, I've been struggling with this. Like, I realize I do this thing. And then, but I want this other thing. And then it's so cool because I have had clients come back and be like, I just want you to know how much of an impact that had. Like, I ended up quitting my job and getting my dream job as a this. And that happens all the time where like when I actually see positive changes come in people's lives, to me, that's a success. And that's why I do it. And something else that came to mind that I also thought was so fascinating when you were talking, and a reason why I think human design is so helpful. There's another person who does human design, Giselle from the Cosmic Laundry. I'm sure she'd be okay with me sharing this. We met in person a few years ago, and she used to be a therapist. And so she has a long history of working with people in therapy. And once she started learning human design and actually bringing that into her own knowledge and starting to use human design alongside the therapy, she said she could get to the root of people's problems sometimes even in the first session. Whereas before human design, just therapy, it would take 4 or 5 sessions getting to know someone to actually get to like what's actually going on here. And to me, I was like, how incredible is that? If you can start getting the effects of a session 5 in session 1 just by adding human design in, then I don't know, to me that's like so invaluable.
Yeah, it's like a managing quantum leap shortcut tool, right? It is.
It's so
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also have to say, like, because I told you I was a coach. Like, I was a coach, but I was always like a little doubting myself. Like, if what I'm doing really gets people results and if I'm good enough and this kind of stuff, that changed the instant human design came into my life. It was almost like my confidence was turned down. It was like, oh my gosh, and have never looked back since then. But of course, we have to use it in this like intuitive way. The most powerful is always intuitive for me. Like I don't even do other sessions anymore, but it's so true. And I want to share actually something with you. Like I was part of, from the Kabbalah, right? They had this guy, David, he does like live Q&A calls for the community for free. And I was one a couple of weeks ago. And the first person that came on the call, she was also a therapist, psychologist, and all this kind of stuff. And she said, so, okay, now that I have been learning Kabbalah and this stuff, and like, she's like, I have to be honest, that is so much more helpful than anything else I can ever study or get certified in. She really said that. But she was like, yeah, but I mean, can I use this now? And I mean, should I mention as Kabbalah or because this whole thing with copywriting and you need to get certified, we have all this thing. And he was just like, no, that's great. Like, please use it. I mean, we want to share this with the world. It was such a loving, expansive energy that they truly care that this such deep, profound, life-changing knowledge gets us far and wide. And I think everything they do is for nonprofit anyways. That's also like that's a big message if you think about it. And I also have to say with human design, that's one of the things that kind of repelled me sometimes a little bit. And I want to also be cautious right now, not to judge. I may, forgive me, but a lot of human design teachings are very hyped up, very much just about the money, and that kind of took the joy away from me for a little bit. And I really had to make a conscious effort to stop following these people, not to make them wrong, but it was more like, this is not good for me because that's not what I want to get into. I'm also very thankful for reflecting this back to me because anytime I have something in my awareness, there must be a part of me that I just want to make quick money with human design. And there's this one secret gate that's going to make everything go well for you, right? Because you hear these stories like, oh, once I activated my gate, my business took off. So I think there was a part of me wanting that in some way. And I had to realize that, I'm in for the long game. This is not like a magic pill. I mean, it is a little bit, but not like, it's not going to do it for you. You have to show up for yourself. You have to take action, right? You have to check in with where you're really coming from, if that's from ego or from your heart. And yeah, I don't even know where I was going with that, but I think all of that putting into context is that human design, it has been such a passion and such a joy. I feel so grateful for it. And it also was this gift to bring up so much shadows all around us, right? And which is funny because Ra's conscious sun gate is 51, which in the Gene Keys is about what? Awakening, right?
Right. Shock.
Yeah,
Wow. Yeah, yeah,
to
that's so true.
initiate into finally waking up, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah.
So
No, he's fascinating. Imagine if he would, I always think about that if he was still alive. There are so many questions that I think we all start to answer for ourselves. The system goes on. He had the Genius to Freak channel too, didn't he? He's such a
I
unique
think
person. If you
so.
hear him speak or learn about him, like he's a unique guy and I relate to him because his voice, it's almost as if the way he expresses things, it's not so literal. And I'm like that as well. Sometimes people hear me talk and they're like, wait, but you said this. And I'm like, no, like you don't understand what I'm trying to say. And I kind of have to watch maybe that I don't say certain words because I actually sometimes just speak so in the moment. But what I'm actually meaning is something that I can't even put words to. And I feel like Ra is kind of like that. He uses a lot of analogies, and he's just an interesting guy. And the way he expressed the system, I think, was so pure, and he really meant everything he said, but it gets interpreted in so many different ways now. And that's why what you said, you see people all the time on Instagram talking about this. I see it too in the human design world, like Ross said this and you're wrong and blah, blah, blah. And I just stay away from that stuff because it's just like, yeah, you know? But
Yeah,
yeah.
Evan, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. So before we come to a close, first I would like to ask you, how can people find you if they would like to book a session with you, work with you?
People can always find me on my Instagram or TikTok, but lately more on Instagram, which is man.gen.magic, mangenmagic. I'm always doing stuff on there. Every Monday I do questions. I like to answer people's questions and just connect, don't always have to book a reading. We can just chat on there, send me a message, but you'll see a link in my bio that goes to readings, everything. I have a mentorship program if you want to work one-on-one. And I am always trying to work on new little fun things to release. Like I released this environment guide this past year, which is a really fun way to explore human design environment, and just always try and share interesting stuff on my Instagram. So that's a way. Yeah, you'll see a link to my website too if you're curious, but always get in touch. Let me know you listen to this episode. I love to just chat with you and hear what you thought and hear who you are and what you experienced. Like I love connecting with people. So yeah, that's really all I want from this.
Yeah. And you see, I will tell you now, you are Fräulein.
Yeah.
Right. I love it. No, I love that, Tarah. Thank you so much. And one more question I have for you is that what's one nugget of wisdom that has been life-changing for you that you would love to share with the listeners?
Ooh, ooh, one negative wisdom. Like, I don't even know in this moment. I think what I said about the fact that in a way everything is changing, like don't get so attached to whatever you're experiencing in the moment because it will change, whether it's good or bad, but especially if you're feeling troubles or moments of darkness or fogginess, like yeah, it's probably trying to tell you something, and maybe you do need to get out of bed and do something with your life. Like I'm not saying that at all, but I'm just saying don't get attached to like this is who I am now, and it's never going to change. Also, I think it's always such a positive thing to get out of your comfort zone, whoever you are in life, and to try something new, learn something new, always be evolving. That's what I always say. So, when you start to feel stagnant, maybe that's a sign that you need to just go and learn something new or do something out of your comfort zone, meet people. There's always something to be uncovered through every new experience. And that's what I love about life, is that there is no shortage of experiences or people to meet or things to learn. They're everywhere waiting for you at all times. So don't be afraid to just go out and explore.
I love that. You see, something very profound came out. I know I put you on the spot, but I'm happy I did, because that's such a beautiful, powerful reminder. Because it's also, Gene Key 35 is the only constant there is change. And that has been a message for me lately too. It's more about taking action, more about getting out of my comfort zone and having more courage to do those things. So thank you for that double reminder as well. So
you're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
my pleasure. We can do this again anytime. I love that. So thank you so much, Tarah. It was so much fun to have this conversation with you. I think we both have to re-listen to that.
Yeah, for sure. Re-listening.
All right. Yeah. And thank you, listeners, for tuning in as always. I really appreciate you, and please reach out to Tarah. She is super amazing. I'm going to make sure to drop all the links in the show notes, and I'm very excited to be with you all on the next episodes.